put together a bunch of slides if you want, but I'm thinking more of them as cards with a little prompt on it. This prompt could be a quote, an image, a word, a sentence. But my idea was that you choose one of these cards randomly. And if we want to impose a little time limit on it, we can just set a timer, and we can just flash this little card prompt, and I'm sure we'll get some associations, and we can talk around that. Of course, with creative coding being the main topic. But then perhaps, shaking things up a bit, perhaps putting a little restrainer on ourselves so that we don't become too long-winded. And getting a chance to, discuss various topics. Cool. Well, there's, I prepared around, 40, 45-ish prompt cards. So we can just pick one. And I believe we should perhaps set a timer to like 10 minutes. So that the discussion don't become too rushed. But I don't know, Tim, perhaps I should just pick one and let you go at it, because I know what I would be saying to some of them, at least.
Okay, that's cool.
I will be finding, I don't know, let me see, randomly choosing this one.
So there's a person looking onto a thing, onto an object, and this kind of, this triggers something that I found extremely frightening, to be honest. There was an interview with Tristan Harris, who I highly admire. I really like his work very much. He's the head of the Center for Humane Technology. Some of you might know him from the documentation The Social Dilemma on Netflix, which is pretty amazing. You definitely should check it out. It's about social media. And he is very concerned about the problems that social media has, right? I mean, we all know that it's very addictive. It's very manipulative. There's so many problems that come along with social media. And there was one thought that I found super powerful. He said that our smartphones are nothing else than an interface between our brains, and this is here, the left, right? This is the person, right? And the largest supercomputer in the world. That means, as you know, Facebook and Google, I mean, they have giant computers there, right? Which calculate which posts you might look at the longest, right? So this is kind of a connection between you and a huge computer, and which is driven by super intelligent AI and algorithms that they're working on, since many, many years. And that was a thought I found very frightening, to be honest, and very clear. So, by the way, that's one of the reasons why I now use a dumb phone. Since 4 weeks or 3 weeks, I have a smartphone, but it has no SIM card. That means I cannot do calls with it. And I have to be in my flat and have wireless LAN to have access to my iPhone. Right, so that's very helpful, to be honest. I don't feel that much pressure to look into WhatsApp if somebody wrote something.
Great. Yeah. This deliberately dumbing down the phone and taking some of the smartness out of it, de-smarting it. I like that.
Yeah. I love this low-tech thought. So I really like to see how it feels to work with some more low-level technologies and see what kind of results come out of that, right? Just like processing or P5.js.
It's a very, a nice way to deal with this, I don't know, to circumvent all of these dark patterns that have been deliberately designed to tap into like our psyche and our emotions and force us to like look at that screen ever so often. So turning away from that as a deliberate action, that I really like.
What does this graphic mean to you?
So when I'm looking at this slide, I'm seeing this person looking out into the world, and we have this convex lens shape dispersing his view out in different directions and different angles. And I think perhaps of this lens as being code literate, or code as a tool. if you put that in front of your view of the world, perhaps you will see things in new connections and a new light. You will be able to consider what surrounds you from new angles, and you take on things, and perhaps also thinking up new ideas, dreaming up new ideas. Code, in my opinion, is something that enables you to look at places that you would otherwise not look if you weren't able to think in code or work with code.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely agree. That's very interesting. I'm very interested in what kind of places do you see, or what kind of perspectives do you get when you look through code? What pops up in your mind when you think that's what you've learned through working with code creatively?
I don't know. It kind of lends itself a bit to one of the other prompt cards that I had. And perhaps as you're editing this, you can just overlay that. But that's the one that is a screenshot from this Matrix movie. Sometimes, as I'm working with design or looking at design or visual communication in general, sometimes instead of seeing things for what they are, I kind of like my eyes glaze over a bit, and I start deconstructing it mentally into for loops and conditions and hex colors. And, it's kind of like getting a little bit of like damage from working with this for too long. But it kind of like shifts my perspective into trying to decompile my world around me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a positive thing, but still it sometimes sparks new ideas or prompts me to try and to recreate stuff to understand the underlying principles better. And but also, reading all of the wonderful literature that has been published this day and age about code, and people way more skillful than me dreaming up new designs and exercises. I mean, code as a creative medium by Levin and Brain, just a treasure trove, cram-packed, full of wonderful exercises that is a much more, questioning the world around you, a critical stance to technology, all of these things that perhaps I'm not that inclined to look at myself. But, looking through the lens of code and reading about all these assignments really, I think as an educator, inspires me to come up with new assignments that include these aspects as well.
That's super, super interesting. I mean, creating assignments is also a topic we could talk about for hours. What I really like here is working with let's say the things that the processing foundation creates, like P5.js and processing, because the underlying message is also in these products. I would say products, even though they are not sold, they are for free, and that's great. Is kind of to deconstruct things, as you just said. It's about looking at the world and understanding or having a tool to build positions or artistic positions onto recent developments in society. Just like I think the work of Lauren McCarthy is the best example for this, right? How code and technologies like P5.js could be used to create reflections on today's world. This is something I find personally super, very beautiful. Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, that's cool. 27.
27. Looking at that. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Yeah. So what comes to my mind here is the word flow. Because flow, it's this phenomenon that you experience when you are deeply concentrated and joyfully working on something. And sometimes I feel like this little girl working with all these amazing tools and functions that processing and P5.js have to weave something like weave something that I find interesting, following my own intuition. Yeah.
Great. The thing that I get, or the thing that I pick up looking at this, is of course this, youthful playfulness. Really being totally lost in the moment and just chasing soap bubbles or mathematical functions. But I think with the thing that she's chasing being mathematical functions and mathematical terms. Perhaps to me, it evokes a sense of being. I've gotten my love for math rekindled. That's a consequence of working with code. Perhaps I share the same fate and shared experience as many others who are viewing this video as well. I wouldn't say was traumatized, but still I was more like bored to death in school with some of the really like fictitious and I don't know, far-fetched assignments that my math teacher came up with. He was perhaps like trying his best to teach me all about the unit circle and the relationship between sine and cosine by asking questions like, you have this ladder and you want to climb onto the roof of this house that is so and so tall, and the ladder is that long, and at what angle do I need to position that against the wall? And I was like, why? Who cares? I'm not going to climb in a ladder. I'm not going to get on any roof. Why do we want to make me do this assignment? So I couldn't really connect. But being a very visual person, the moment I found processing, the moment I began to look into what can you actually achieve with a little dash of sine and a little dash of cosine, and raising something to a power, or all of a sudden it became very clear to me that these were very useful functions, and math all of a sudden again made total sense to me. So I'd say from being ignorant about math or not really caring about that, I feel sometimes when I open up processing a little bit like this girl smiling, running around, chasing these mathematical soap bubbles and just popping them or testing them out, or using them to create wonderful weird stuff.
The magic of math, and it's also I share exactly the same experience, to be honest. I hated math in school, but I hated school at all. So when I was a teenager, I really didn't like school. It was like a catastrophe for me. I didn't really fit into the system, and I was not really a good pupil and not a good student. But what I experienced then later on is that I start getting interested in things when I have an outcome, like a result. And this was something I experienced in making music. Also, this motivated me to look into harmony and music theory. And later on, it was creative coding. Like, okay, when I know how the sine function works, which is totally boring in itself, but when I know how it works, I can create these amazing wave figures, and I can post them to Tumblr. That was the golden era, I think, when Tumblr was kind of having this very simple algorithm, just pushing everything to the top. That is new, right? A very simple algorithm, and I love that, and I loved seeing people reacting to it by sharing it on specific blogs, and that was just magical. I loved that so much. I always need something like a result, something like a artifact that comes out of the process, and that really drives me very much. There's a great book by Austin Kleon called "Share Your Work," which kind of puts everything that I just said into. You got to share your work and get feedback, and this is very motivating in the end. Yeah,
absolutely. And I tell that to my students as well. I have this saying that I picked up in some random internet meme, but it's struck a chord with me. It says, stop downloading, start uploading.
That's what you said. Yeah, I love that. That's amazing.
That's I think that's really something like I would love to print that out on a big sheet and just put it in the studios of the students to really like have this inspirational poster or motivational poster, because I believe sharing is caring as well. And by sharing your work, yes, you're exposing a bit of yourself. And I know as a designer and as a visual person that most of my students, as well as myself, feel a bit like sharing your work is exposing you as a person a bit. And I say during the years and during the decades, I've been building up this ability to take in critique and not making it something that is personal. It is about critiquing the work that I'm doing, not critiquing the person who made it. And I see still some students, younger students, still need to make this distinction. And I say this in the most positive and caring way, because I think the sooner you as a student learn how to grasp and deal and reflect on the critique that you're being given without making it a part of you being questioned as a person, the better, the better you are at sharing the stuff that you've made and receiving constructive feedback on how to improve. And it's got nothing to do with who you are or how you look or how you think or what you do. It's about your stuff that you're sharing, right?
Yeah, absolutely true. I totally agree. And I also see a big problem in downloading all the time. It's like, I know so many people who feel, scared of showing something because they feel like everybody's better than me. And, they're just scrolling their reels and their TikTok account. It's just like, it's so overwhelming. And uploading, I think it's poison. I feel like, scrolling on Instagram is poison. If you feel like, if you get these bad feelings about it, it really pushes you down. And uploading is a good thing. Absolutely. I love that quote.
Yeah. All right.
That's great. Cool.
Good.
Now it's your turn, Stig. You got to choose something.
I'll share it and you can see what I found for us. This one.
Yes, that's a very good one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
what do you think?
I think it is a wonderful thing. I love that. Randomness is really amazing. I think random leads to generative aesthetics. So generative aesthetics are a huge problem in what we both do, right? So I think graphic designers, or basically designers, are always aim to define a goal and follow a path that leads to that goal. The problem with creative coding is that first, especially in the beginning, it is about experimentation. It doesn't have to do in the thinking, in the process, of how you look at or how the process looks like. It's not about following a specific goal. It's more about exploring things. It's an inductive methodology instead of a deductive methodology. Not having the goal in mind, but having the process in mind. And most or many of my students struggled throughout my courses in universities with embracing this. So this randomness, these generative aesthetics that come to life through having randomness and some unpredictable results can be something that holds people back from getting over the threshold, right?
So in a sense, a loss of control, fear of losing control.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's the thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. To me, random is like a double-edged sword. It's both simultaneously. It's a blessing, but it's a curse. And I say, like, blessing in a sense that us humans really aren't good at being random. And I can see that when I'm working with code, and I'm fooling myself into believing that I'm picking random combinations of things. And somehow I seem to get stuck in a very limited range of outputs that my code can make. So as I add a little splash of randomness to my code, whereas I would otherwise be tweaking some hard-coded values, true randomness emerges in a sense that this range or this design solution space is rapidly expanded by all these random combinations. I can see perhaps the entire potential of my code unfold, and I can sort of rein it in a bit or dial it in a bit. But in the same way that random is useful for triggering new ideas or exploring design solutions, I believe random is really a curse, in a sense that often we see students about to learn how to do programming adding randomness to everything, just dipping the brush in the can of randomness and just smearing it all across the canvas. I mean, we've seen these eye-gouging RGB color schemes that emerge as a result of just random 255, random 255, random 255, and boom, you've got an RGB color. And to me, that kind of randomness is really a curse, because, designing something requires you to take some informed decisions on what you want to convey emotionally, like even in terms of color psychology, what colors do you choose to convey what message? But all of that is lost if you just, let go of the steering wheel as a designer and just let happenstance or randomness take over. So I think thoughtfulness would be something that I would want to highlight as a way of working with creative coding. Randomness is fine in a process of understanding your code and trying to dial in all the different variables that you have. But at one point, you will need to some extent, let go of control, let go of random and take some control yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see the learning process of creative coding a bit like, like in the very beginning, you have no control about anything. This is really painful for some people, especially those who want to have this control. And through learning to code, you get more and more control. Everything becomes more dense and more controlled, more dense and controlled. And in the end, you are able to create systems that behave the way you want, right? You can put the randomness into the right spot in the end. And but maybe this is also, again, the threshold concept that you mentioned in your thesis, right? The threshold concept in terms of having this very steep learning curve, which is maybe not just a learning curve, but also let's say a curve of perception, how you perceive what you are doing. And that's a very interesting thought, I think. Yeah.
And as perhaps to wrap this topic up, I just want to emphasize that for everybody watching and still using random, by all means do so, but just be aware that there are several other strategies for getting something that is random without the very harsh changes in randomness that would otherwise occur if you just use a random function. Like even just using a noise instead of random dramatically improves the visual output. But of course, if you want to go full on for 100% randomness, by all means do that. But just be aware that it comes with its own set of consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. So I personally, by the way, use more. I mostly for controlling anything, I use waves. I don't know why. I never use noise. I also don't know why. Randomness is I do it sometimes, but mostly I like to fight with these tan and sine functions and get something out of it that works. So yeah.
Cool.
We've got some questions, by the way, here in the chat.
Yeah.
Someone says, do you mean random or experimental? That's what Tamim Sankari says. Who, by the way, congrats, Tamim, for your amazing 36 days for type visuals. I really love them. He's from Dubai, I think. So I don't get the question 100%, to be honest.
Perhaps, I don't know if that's the right thing that I'm getting out of the question, but still, asking the question of randomness in a sense that, are just leaving things to randomness in the process of, are you using randomness to experiment and to discover the potential or certain parts of the solution space? If you have your code as something that is capable of making this virtual solution space with all possible solutions that can emerge. Sometimes, you want to explore this solution space.
Yeah.
To run around and see, what's under this stone or what's under this stone, or if I turn around this corner, whatness can be very helpful in allowing you to walk around this circumference of your design solution space and understanding what is possible within that.
Absolutely. But anyway, let's go to the question of Henning, who says, I don't know if there's such a thing as true randomness in programming. No, there is no randomness. But I think most programmers don't use randomness at all. That's a creative coding thing, right?
Yeah, and even if we want to talk about randomness in processing is not at all random. It's a pseudo-random generator. You've got this random seed that you can just set, give it a number, and you will have this same random sequence repeated over and over again. I use that a lot in my work when I'm looking for random combinations of things, and I'm using random seed, and instead of changing all these places where I've got randomness into certain variables or into certain values, I'm just changing the random seed so that if I can say like this solution with a random seed of 125 looks great, this solution with a random seed of 816 looks great. So just changing a random seed to be able to repeat what you've made before, even if it's quote unquote random.
That's amazing. I didn't know that this exists. I mean, I've saw this function random seed, but I definitely got to check it out. That's super, super cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm showing some of my students to build these very rudimentary intermediate tools that they can give to a client. And I would tell them, if you want to stay in business as a graphic designer, perhaps you just want to give them a little tool with one dial, and that one dial is controlling the random seed number, because that way your client can just sit there and just fine tune this knob and write down the number of the combination or the random seed number that they found produced a pleasing result. And then they would go and report back to you and say, we want number this, and that. And of course, you would go on, render the high resolution piece, and then charge them with an invoice. So
that's really, really nice. I got to check that out. It's really cool. Okay, it's slide number 19. Okay.
19, yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
So this quote says, we do not reject the machine, we welcome it, but we would desire to see it mastered. I would like to say something about this here that comes to my mind. There's a nice quote. I don't exactly remember who said this, but Tristan Harris mentioned this a few times. He said, we human have paleonthotic brains, medieval institutions, and godlike technologies. That's what I really, really like about it. I think this is a great quote because it shows the whole dilemma that we are in, right? So we have computers that can kind of do so many things. We have so much power as humans at the moment. And what comes to your mind when you read this quote?
I might be a bit biased here because, of course, it was a quote that I dug out doing some research for a course several years ago, and it's stuck with me ever since. So what I'm getting from it is that I got this, that he, Charles Robert Ashby and his peers were a bit frightened of this industrialization that was taking place at the time. They moved from these very unique, one-of-a-kind, handmade things towards this industrialized machine churning out what he called soulless replicas of things. And he said that, he was frightened as a craftsman to the prospect of having to succumb to whatever the machine was capable of. And he thought, that's severely limiting my skills as a craftsman if I have to work with whatever this primitive machine is capable of doing. What I want, and that's what I'm getting from this quote, is that he said, machines are great, machines are very useful, but they should never, ever dictate who is the master and who is the servant. Humans should always be the ones with the ideas and the ones with the concepts, the ones with the visions, and we should shape our machines to accommodate that. It shouldn't be the other way around. And sometimes I think even turning this back to the fact that I'm a teacher, I'm teaching students and teaching introductory courses in creative coding. Sometimes I see this dilemma of who's the master and who's the servant, and especially at introductory courses where you're trying to get a grip of how to use code, how to understand code, how to read code, how to debug code. It's kind of like this slippery soap bar that my students have a hard time getting a firm grasp of. They are becoming involuntary servants of the machine, of the code. The code is very much dictating to them what they can make. And I guess in introductory courses, yes, it's always going to be that to a certain extent. But as you move on and as you progress and as you learn and as you become more capable, you as a student, you as a designer, I teach mainly designers, you at one point will, switch the roles again. And as you become more fluent and knowledgeable in programming, you can dictate what you want to make based on your knowledge of the machine and what it's capable of, but you can shape it in whatever form you want to arrive at.
Yeah, this is amazing. I love everything you said. It's so true. I think this is also, again, this algorithmic anxiety. There's a publication that is called like this that I found on a website, with amazing publications about the problem of in the intersection, or the problems in the intersection of art and design, art and code. Sorry, and yeah, absolutely agree. Especially in times when we have these AI algorithms that kind of are thinking independently, and we cannot really see what they do because they are kind of black boxes. Yeah, that's the thing. This reminds me a lot also to the book Code at Art by Jochen Vierhoff and Georg Trogemann. And the problem here is, from a societal point of view or philosophical point of view, that we always can, let's say, judge technologies after they are in the world, right? So we are always beyond or behind with the reflection of these technologies, right? We bring them into the world because economy puts them into the world, and it takes quite a long time to understand what is good and what is not good. I believe that we are not really finished with reflecting on the internet. So, and I mean, the internet is now 30 years old, and now we have blockchain, which is probably a good thing in many cases, right? I believe that blockchain technologies can be very beneficial for many things. Artificial intelligence as well. And all these things just come together into a crazy bubble of 1,000 innovations, and it's very difficult to stay at the same level in terms of cultural reflection of all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
Cool. Nice. So now it's your turn.
It's my turn. Oh, okay now. Let me see. Perhaps just like close my eyes and let randomness be the judge. Yeah, I'm gonna.
You can write an algorithm if you want.
All right, I'm gonna close my eyes and I'm just gonna scroll and we'll see. Okay. So. Okay. Wow. Yes. 34.
34. Let's see.
Do you want to share it, or should I just briefly share it?
Yeah, I just dragged it.
Okay.
Here on top of us on the screen sharing. Everybody should be able to see it. Make it your own.
Make it your own. Yes.
Life comes to mind. Make it your life. Make it your own life. Not talking creative coding, not talking technologies. I mean, we are on this planet, and I think everybody has the freedom to be oneself. That's what comes to my mind here. Make your life your own life. Don't follow anyone. And I mean, following is good, but at some point it's not good. I really like this thought of having kind of a goal, right? So having kind of a direction. The goal doesn't have to be very fixed or very very how to say that? Not deterministic. right? So, but it can be something or you can be something like a vector that points into a direction. And of course, sometimes things change. Sometimes directions have to change. But I feel like I love the idea, especially when I build my platform. I like the idea, and I orient myself very much on the idea that I want to build a school, not just a personal platform for me, but kind of I'm thinking a lot about the idea of building a school. And I get my inspiration for my platform and how it should work mostly from universities or from online learning platforms that I like. And I always try to embrace and use the benefits of being let's say, one-man show to build this by my own. But a one-man show with, let's say, web development skills, right? So I always think about this platform should be something that kind of takes if possible, the best sides of teaching and puts them into an infinitely available and a worldwide available format. And this drives me very much because I feel like education, especially in design, I've saw many different schools, many different universities now. I've taught at 4 or 5. I studied at 3. I gave workshops at many more. And now I have kind of let's say a very humble, but I have kind of a very humble and low birth perspective on a specific area. And I feel like, yes, they all struggle with the same things, especially during COVID. And I don't want to build a competition, but more an extension. So I think, I've learned a lot through observing the problems of educational institutions. And this makes it possible for me to see the benefits of creating an own little online institution with fewer people, but with a little group of people gathering around a specific topic. That's what I find very inspirational. That's where my vector points to at the moment.
Wow. I mean, that's, exactly my, what I had hoped for would happen when we made these card prompts to have a chance to veer off in a direction that I had not anticipated, but still is really, really interesting. And and I want absolutely to, Tim, on behalf of many others, I guess both the ones viewing the stream right now, but the ones viewing the videos later on, a massive and collective thank you for making it your own. Thank you for taking the time to distill some of all these experiences and understandings of schools and teaching into your online courses and into your online community, and being the person that you are and giving back in the way that you are to the creative coding community. I mean, thank you very much for that.
Thank you for your words. It's really, thank you. Well, I think, when I was 25, I was quite a long time in my life. I was in a very difficult situation internally. I felt like my way is very deterministic. So I have to, join the company of my father at the time. I was very much pressure. He didn't, I love my father. He's amazing. And he never said that I should do it. But I felt kind of this pressure that I want to give back or something. And I want to, let's say, orient my whole business life into a direction that makes my father happy for any reason that was inside of me. And when I was 25 and I was studying graphic design in Münster, I was getting the experience that I really can make it my own, right? I can really create it my own. I started after being abroad in Lisbon, and I was really experiencing a crisis where I felt like I need to change something in my life. I really need to change the perspective because I love design. I love to work creatively with people, but I don't want to go into this specific direction. I want to find my own one. When I went back, I worked 2 years as a tutor in Münster, and that was the epiphany, right? I felt like this is what I want to do. I want to support young people finding their voice, utilizing their creativity to create something amazing. And the idea of being an art educator was kind of fixed for me when I was 25. That was the thing that I wanted to do. And then I was working as doing many different things until I was getting my first teaching assignments. Or my teaching, assignment is the right word, right? I don't know. Anyway, I was working as an educator. for creative coding. And I saw that creative coding is a really and very interesting thing. It deals with societal questions, not just, it doesn't bring only benefits in terms of getting a good job in the design industry, which is the case. So folks, if you're watching this, creative coding is amazing. People are desperately looking for creative coders out there. But at the same time, it also had this kind of critical perspective onto the world. And this was the combination that I was looking for. And now, for me, it feels like a purposeful work. And even though I often cross my borders, I feel like, okay, I'm overworking, I'm doing too much. Sometimes I really learn a lot about about myself, right? But creating a community is, for me, the most beautiful thing I can imagine for myself. And yeah, it works quite well, I think, and I'm super thankful for that. So it is not, sometimes I feel like I'm very lucky about it. That I can do this.
Luck, I wouldn't say luck to an extent, but you worked your way to the point where you are now. So luck in itself is not just gonna cut it. It's some hard work and some dedicated effort on your part as well. So yeah, I'd say what I actually initially had in mind when I put this in the card prompt, the prompt cards, was a lot more. I don't know, a lot less philosophical, a lot less about life.
You know me, I'm very
you are, and I appreciate that. I put it in there as a way, perhaps, to give myself a chance to just, and I'll do this very briefly, just comment on the fact that a lot of students go out and find bits and snippets of code that they patch and botch together, stick together, and it's very easy to find something on open processing or some of these other like social code sharing platforms, and then you just copy it and you paste it, tweak a few parameters, and boom, that's the assignment done. But my urge that this prompt would trigger would be that take whatever you want out there, stitch it together into this Frankenstein kind of thing, but make sure that you give it a twist and make it your own. Just don't replicate what have been made before. Make it your own.
Yeah, that's great.
Right, Tim. I believe that the time was much well spent on you elaborating on these more philosophical aspects. So let's just restart the timer, and I believe it's your turn to find a new prompt card.
Sure. Yeah, I've got one. This is 36.
36.
Should designers learn to code?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Should designers learn to code? Yes and no. So that's a very useful answer, but I'm being indecisive about this. Yes, if it tickles your fancy, if it's something that you want to dive into, if it's something that you can see that you want to pursue, something that you want to get better at. But I believe the thing that should coax you as a designer into looking into the programming and coding in general would be that you're motivated to do so. Like you're internally motivated. You shouldn't learn to code if it's something that is being put on you as just another task you should fulfill, or it's something that you, is being asked to do. You're totally free to question whether or not it would be useful for you. And, speaking from experience, whenever I'm teaching coding courses, some of these coding courses are mandatory. Some of these coding courses are electives. The mandatory ones, where I have a cohort of students, 20, 30, 40 sometimes. In mandatory courses, I'd say somewhere between a third and like half of the students are more or less being dragged into this by the fact that the course is mandatory. And they don't see the overall purpose. I mean, they dabble a bit with code and find it more or less interesting, but the motivation isn't there. They want to pursue other interests. They want to do freehand illustrations. They want to do motion graphics. They want to do something else. So with a total lack of motivation, don't do it. But if you're motivated, well, by all means, learn how to code. And I also perhaps just want to make the point that I think, learning how to code isn't necessarily a skill that would require you to open up, say, processing or P5 or open frameworks or whatever you want to choose to work in. Learning how to code is also a thinking skill. Like we've had scholars for several years now trying to establish this notion of computational thinking. And computational thinking has been something that has been looked into, weaving into the curriculum of not just designers, but perhaps like any vocational occupation you can have, primary schools, colleges, universities, whatever. And it's, I believe, computational thinking skills has also been highlighted as one of those critical skills for a workforce in decades to come. So my point would be, and I'm making that to some of my students as well, if you don't like to work with code, writing syntax, tracking bugs, whatever, just fine. Just skip that step. But at least, learn how to think computationally. Take a look at what you're doing as a designer. You're making all of these, like we have this term for it. It's like, I'm trying to think of this now, but it's kind of like you're working intuitively. You're just putting up shapes on the screen, rearranging them, repositioning them, giving them color. But you're doing that, to use a German word, you're doing that im Bauch, in the belly, on the belly, on the gut feel. Whereas if you want to be able to transfer what you're doing as a graphic designer into code, or if you want somebody else to be able to take your work and make it into code, you can't work out of gut feelings alone. You need to be more explicit, and you need to be more aware of, why am I doing this? Why am I making this bigger? Why am I repositioning this to the right? Why am I justifying the text? Why am I choosing this over that color? You need to be able to explicate and to verbalize what you're doing. And in terms, I would say that makes you an even better and a more informed and a more knowledgeable designer. So you can learn how to think in code and just leave out the part where you're actually typing in syntax and dealing with bugs entirely. So to answer the question, should designers learn to code? Yes and no, on different levels. Depends if you're motivated and such.
Yeah, my head is exploding of ideas. So I gotta admit something here, because I've got several thoughts on this. When I started studying in Bielefeld, I had a kind of a paradigm inside myself. So, and I've been quoted by the Page magazine once, because I gave an interview about should designers learn to code, right? And they kind of took out of sense and out of the context, which was very misleading, and put it into the headline. And the headline was, let me try to translate this: only programming designers are prepared for the challenges of the future.
That's a bold statement.
And this post was completely exploding on social media. They told me that it's really crazy how many comments this post had. To be honest, I totally changed my mind about that. And I didn't mean it that way. Absolutely not. I didn't mean it that way. When I started to study in my master in Bielefeld, which I do since 2019, just to learn a little bit about the education of creative coding, I had the paradigm inside myself that I have to find a way to prove that designers should learn to code, right? I was thinking that I should try to find a narrative or a manifesto, right? I kind of had very bold statements in my head, and I felt like they're right. People should learn to code in times of digitization, technologization. Is that the right way to spell it? Okay. people should learn how software works. But then I was reading more into the scientific research of people, and there's a lot, of course, right? And I just realized that I'm pretty much inside of my own bubble. So the challenges of the 21st century are not that we have to learn to program. It's not really about learning a specific technology, but it's more to learn specific skills. And that's what I embrace very much in my teaching now. So learning how to think in systems, learn computational thinking, learn how to solve problems, how to ask questions, all these things are much more important. And learn to learn, right? How to connect with people. So I think the 4 C's of the 21st century skills, I think they are creativity, collaboration, communication, and one more thing I don't remember. But all these things can be trained through creative coding. That's what I've learned, and I will never say something that I would say everybody should learn to code. That would be wrong and stupid. But at the same time, computational thinking is something that is very beneficial, especially in times when everything gets more digital and code and data is flowing through our physical space.
Yeah.
Right.
Working in my daily job in a school where we teach graphic designers, visual communication, and journalists, I know for a fact that, yes, indeed, those striking headlines are often something that is taken out of a context and used to, clickbait people into something, having an opinion. So you're totally excused, Tim. I know, knowing you for many years now, that yes, indeed, perhaps that was not what you intended to say. But again, they took it out of context. Yes. But I'd say
in a way, I felt it. I felt like, I gotta admit that I really felt like I need to prove it, right? But I was completely wrong. So and that's something. Was a good experience to see. Okay, I was on the wrong path.
I'd say on the topic of should designers learn to program or should designers learn to code. Again, of course, programming and coding being 2 very distinct activities, but never mind. That's a topic for later. Should they, I think it was a researcher named Faramas Amiri who I believe coined this phrase programming tourists. And I really like that phrase because he's comparing how to learn a programming language to, in one way, how would you learn a new language as a linguist as opposed to, say, a tourist? A linguist would be very much into the semantics, sentence structures, all of these things surrounding how to speak, how to learn, how to understand a language. Mm-hmm. Whereas a tourist would just be interested in, learning enough to get by. So I think if you want to become a programmer, of course, you should not enter design school. You should enter a regular, programming course in a university and become a fully fledged programmer because, absolutely, massive respect to the programmers because, again, they study hard for several years and they know a lot more about refactoring, optimizing, upscaling, productions, all of these things. So, but then again, designers, I say to my students that, think of what you're about to do, learning programming in a way that you're just entering this course as a programming tourist. You need to learn enough to get by. You need to make yourself understandable. You need to know enough programming to make a working proof of concept or, as we're moving to dynamic media and being able to interact with everything around us, it's no use that you just hand over something that you, drawn on a back of a napkin to a programmer and asking them to recreate that. You need to be able to engage with the media directly and make a sketch to show what you want. And then you can hand it over to the real professionals and they can implement that. So programming tourists, perhaps that's what we want them to become.
Yeah. True.
All right. Keeping an eye on the timer here. I have actually one that I have chosen now deliberately, Tim, and I'm very excited to see what it's sparks of ideas in your head. Number 6.
Number 6. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
A little juxtaposition.
Completely unexpected. Well, what comes to my mind here? Many things. Let me try to find words for this thought.
Sure.
So I see two different images. On the left side, we see a supermarket with all these products, vegetables, and on the other side, we see people. I see a woman or a girl. I don't know exactly, but she's growing vegetables, right? She's working in a garden.
Yeah.
First of all, I gotta say that I don't eat a lot of meat, so I'm not a real vegan. I'm not a real vegetarian because sometimes I eat meat, but mostly I stopped drinking milk, and I'm I try to eat very healthy, but probably through Nicole because she's a vegan. But what also comes to my mind is independence. So what we see here is, a very, very complex dependency graph on the left side. So we've got many products that are relying on, specific. If we look at this image from a creative coding or from a software perspective, we see products that are bound to dependencies and that have very long supply chains. So to have something like an avocado on your table, it takes a lot of manufacturing, let's say, to make this happen. And that's something I try to avoid always in my teaching. So I never use libraries in my teaching, except when I see there's a real urge, and it's very, very important. I try to teach my students to be very critical about dependencies. I think this is also not just a practical and let's say applicable principle for creative coding, but for whole life. I try to cut dependencies as much as I can in my own life. I'm not talking about friends because I love all my friends, but I'm talking more about being a little bit more independent. So I started to tinker around with Linux. So I'm working on a Linux computer. I don't want to be dependent on Apple computers, for example. I want to have more like an open source environment. Not because I'm a open source FOSS evangelist, but more because I find it interesting to see how I can change my life on a higher dimension, maybe. So that comes to my mind. Like dependencies and supply chains and seeing these supply chains in our environment.
Yeah, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. Great answer. To me, this juxtaposition of vegetables packaged and put on the shelves in a supermarket with a woman doing home gardening and harvesting her own carrots. To me, that kind of like symbolizes this this different relationship between commercial software and homegrown software. I see. To me, it's nice to be able to go to a supermarket and to be able to buy an avocado. I'm living here in Denmark. It's cold, freezingly cold, and I probably won't be able to grow any avocados myself. So the luxury of going to a supermarket and just picking up a 3-pack of avocados, that's very convenient. And convenience, perhaps, is a word that I would use about commercial software packages. I can get access to something that I cannot make myself. It's very convenient. It's neatly packaged, and it's almost ready for consumption or ready for use. But on the other hand, some of these things don't taste like the ones that I grow myself. I mean, in my in my garden. I can grow some tomatoes. I can grow some cucumbers. I can grow some carrots and stuff. But it takes a lot more effort for me to grow carrots and strawberries. But if I'm comparing the ones that I bought, commercial strawberries, with the ones that I grow myself, my strawberries are much better tasting. And it has, I don't know, I have a history. I've grown them, I've made them myself. So my emotional relationship with the homegrown products is far deeper. But perhaps I'm also using this as a metaphor for a question that I get from students ever so often, is that once we've learned processing, is that meant to replace everything else? Should I just let go of my Adobe subscription? Should I just uninstall Cinema? And I go, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Those two things complement each other. I can't home grow everything. And perhaps I don't want to rely on buying everything in a supermarket. It's kind of like, I want to be able to mix and match and to choose whatever I want. So I see, yes, by all means, keep on using InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator. They make your life a lot easier. Don't be afraid of it. It's just like going to the supermarket and picking up something. Whereas, if you want to engage in a little bit more home growing, start writing your own tools as a supplement, as something that you can, use your own and be proud of. It's small batches. It's very unique. It's yours. And it's, made by you, for you. So that's what I get out of this image.
Very interesting. Yeah, there's a connection between our answers. And I think it is not about making radical decisions and be this kind of person who just, negates everything that is kind of dependent on something else. It's more like being aware and looking at the world from that perspective. I think we can make better decisions if we ask ourselves, what does it mean when we are connected with let's say, a chain of elements where we cannot see the end. This is just something that I find interesting from a philosophical perspective, without becoming a radical negator of dependencies, because we are living in an interdependent world. We are all connected, right?
But perhaps, pointing back to your answer, I believe at least becoming aware of the dependencies, becoming aware of what tool chain or supply chain, or that the products that you use, what are they made of? Who are they made by? What does it entail that you're engaging in using commercial software? What does it entail if you're using like open source software? Just becoming aware of the tools that you're using or the products that you're growing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
7.
Number 7. Okay.
And now the audience.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my goodness. This is amazing.
That's a good one. Yep. Yeah. Should I kick off on this one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Where to start? I mentioned earlier in our chat this notion that I got from German about being im Bauch. And I actually got that from this book. For those of you not aware of what this book is, I can just encourage you. I cannot encourage you enough to buy this book, even if it's, to my knowledge, only available in German. I don't know if there's an English translation yet, but nope. Okay. But even if it is in German, I believe, it's such an amazing book by two brothers, Poschauko-Brüdern. And it's just this book that is, half of it is a treasure trove visually of, all of their works. And the way that they work is, or exploring and telling about in this book, is that they're shifting between media, analog and digital media. And they have this little illustration to the right in the slide with some dogmas that they have made for themselves, that if they feel exhausted working on the computer, then it's time to print out what you've got and move to working by hand. It's a bit about thinking im Kopf, in your head, about what you're doing, and at other times just going with this gut feeling of this feels right. I don't know, what I'm doing really, but I'm jamming, and it just, I don't know, speaks to me. So to me, this prompt card is really a stark reminder of you can get to places where you couldn't otherwise be if you're working by hand, if you're working by the computer. But the computer is absolutely not meant to be a replacement for your hands. A thing that I see, and a trend that I see in NFT work these days, and in much generative art, is that this, I don't know, it's kind of like this computational purist view of things. They don't tend to mix in a lot of analog things. We've seen some people experimenting with Resoprint. We see this plotter community working with these axis draw plotters and getting out and working with some analog media. But it's very, most NFT art is very purist to me. They try to keep it 100% something that is made by computation on a computational media. I think you can arrive at much more interesting solutions if you allow yourself once in a while to print out what you've got, add something in an analog and non-digital realm, and then take it from there. And this creative machine is really, really a great inspiration and a great prompt, again, to rethink how you're working with computers.
Yeah, totally. So again, I've got two thoughts on this. The first one is this book back in 2010 taught me to think design in the opposite direction. So instead of thinking about the result, thinking about the material or the tool that you're using. So this is what I call inductive design, or what I've learned is called inductive design. Deductive design is that you have got something like a goal or something like a very complex thing you want to have, right? This is how design works mostly in agencies and in economy. And inductive design is more this kind of laboratory, this experimental approach where you just experiment with these things. For me, it is the essence of creative coding in the end. Creative coding is more. This is what this quote by Mitchell and Brown says that you are mentioning in your thesis. The definition of creative coding is it's a process based on exploration, reflection, and a few more things. It's about experimenting, and I would go that far that I would say if you've got something like a final result in mind that you want to program, then it's probably not creative coding anymore, even though there could be a visual. And even if you use processing or P5.js, what do you think? So a tool, let's say a client asks for a tool for a branding system, and they predefine everything. Is that creative coding or not? What do you think?
No. I wouldn't go as far as saying that. If it comes with a bunch of specs and they have made like all of the conceptualization, that they've even come up with suggestions on, just follow the corporate guidelines.
Yeah.
Use this color palette, use this font. I mean, then yes, okay, great. You can sit down, you can do that, and you can give them what they asked for. But I've been working in advertising agencies before I became an educator, and there was a very famous Danish advertising guy, kind of like I wouldn't necessarily call him like the Danish equivalent to Mad Men, but again, he was really like one of his mottos was that if he came to a client meeting and proposed something to the client that the client would agree on the spot, then he had not pushed the envelope too far. he wanted it, and that was his motto. I wanted to deliberately be hard for my clients to agree on buying on what I'm showing them. They need to go home and kind of like think wow, okay, should we do this or shouldn't we? And challenging your clients, challenging them, and just if they're coming with some predefined specs, then yes, at least as a creative person, you should challenge what is also possible. And to me, that would be the definition of creative coding. Then to take this boring set of specs and then just add all of these things that we've been talking about today. A splash of sign, a little bit of randomness, some thoughts on how you want to go, some deductive or inductive process, and come up with something that they did not anticipate.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah. I've got one question that I would like to ask you, because I've been discussing this with a friend a few days ago. What do you think? What is the difference between... we have still this audio problems, but it's fine. We still have everything on tape. On tape. That's good. What do you think? What is the difference between creative coding and generative design? And is there a difference? What do you think?
Yes, I'd say creative coding is an activity, something you engage in, something you do. Whereas I'd say generative design is more of a method of growing design, or having designs emerge based on an algorithm. It's more like a technique or a method. Whereas I'd say generative design is, you could even define it as a genre if you want. But I consider creative coding an activity, and generative design more of a method or a technique.
That's how I would put it also, I think, into that direction. Yeah. Number 3. Yeah, I love these kind of Venn diagrams.
Yes.
Very beautiful. Number 3.
Okay, yes. Okay, so this is totally unexpected. I actually included this one outside the set of prompt cards, but totally fine, breaking the rules and all. This was more of a little factual thing for you that would perhaps if you wanted to explain
I get it.
what I was writing my PhD thesis about, but I can just briefly comment on that. A lot of it is explained in the diagram itself, but perhaps it adds to the history of me sitting here talking from the perspective of graphic design. I have these 3 overlapping areas, one being graphic design, and as I mentioned, that's where I'm classically trained. Programming, of course, being the one where I'm more like an autodidact coder, and then pedagogy. I've been employed as a teacher now at this university college, that's the right term, for 16 years now. So, of course, pedagogy is an occupational interest of mine as well. But writing my PhD thesis and looking into this field of how to incorporate programming or coding into design education, I investigated what was in these overlaps between the different fields. And I'll spare you of reading what is on the actual slide. It's just that, in the middle where all of these 3 fields intersected and shared something in common, I saw for a number of years now, we've had scholars crying out for more computational design being embedded in design schools and in the curriculums and in the courses as well. And they've been doing so out of, they see an urgent need for that to be put on the curriculum because it's contemporary, because it's what people increasingly do. We see a lot of people, artists and designers who are investigating this field even more and being the ones that are helping defining this progress within this field. But they're doing so without from the outside of educational systems. So to reflect what's contemporary, we want that to be part of the studies as well. And also, as I was looking into this area, I couldn't help looking at what was happening in a closely related field of, architecture. I guess within architecture, you have had architects who are like a three-dimensional equivalent of what we're doing on traditionally two-dimensional sheets of paper, like the repositioning, structuring, layouting, the proportions, scales, all of these things. They're just doing it with buildings instead of like visual communication. But and I might probably be offending a lot of architects here, but apologies. But architects have been really good at putting this into the curriculum and making it something that is mandatory now as part of training to become an architect. And they are less scared, I guess, of math and code, perhaps because they need to work closely with the building constructors. They need to do a lot of calculations. They can't just draw shapes on paper and expect it to hold up in reality. They need to be able to make sure that the damn thing doesn't collapse and such. So we have some within architecture some traits that mean that architects aren't afraid of engaging with code math. That's at least what I have a hypothesis about. But if you look at how architecture is made today, you see a lot of generative design being applied to architecture. I believe this book that is now almost a decade old, this Form Plus Code, shows a lot of examples that is from within the field of architecture. And you can make all of these weird organic shape, very fluid-like looking buildings with math and generative design techniques. They even have this Rhino and Grasshopper tools that are very frequently used within the field of architecture that has been taught to architectural design students. So architecture, the point that I'm trying to make here is that within architecture, code has been embedded in the curriculum for quite a while now. And I can't, for the dawn of light, understand why we don't see more code or more coding or more computational thinking within the field of visual communication and graphic design. And that's what I set out to investigate in my thesis. Yeah, actually, just as a little note to round it off, for those of you who don't want to read through 128 very dense academic pages of this thesis, I encourage you still, hopefully, to download it and just skip forward a few chapters, because I included deliberately a chapter where I'm trying to distill some of the knowledge that I found into 24 very applicable heuristics, targeted educators, designers as well, who wants to engage with creative coding. So it's 24 very simple rules of thumb that you should be aware of as an educator if you're trying to teach graphic design or creative coding to graphic designers.
Stig, this is a massive problem in graphic design and visual communication design education. And I think you definitely should do something like a video series on that, because I also see that interacting with a PDF document that is black and white is still very difficult to, it's still something completely different than if you have someone that you can look at who shows some slides and stuff. I think, this is so valuable, and I see so many educators in the field of visual communication struggling with explaining why people should, look at these things. I think that would be a great thing to do for you.
Absolutely. Recently, I published a paper that was like work in progress, and it was leading up to me trying to, argue for the need of more online courses, video supported textbook examples, like and such. And I have my paper published. People can find it. It's open access as well. But it just shows that, some studies looking into the behavior of these new Gen Z, I believe they're labeled, and how they really don't feel quite fondly of traditional textbooks. They have, been brought up by, if they want to learn something, they go to YouTube and find some tutorials. They have had access to platforms like Khan Academy. Recently, we've seen Brilliant and the likes of it. And they all have these online courses with, making learning an active experience. You have quizzes, you have polls, you have interactive illustrations that allow you to play around with different settings and to, arrive at an understanding in a playful and an experiential way. So really, like total old school textbooks printed on paper, they're dead as a dodo. Don't even bother. We need, and that perhaps is why your courses are so valuable as well and sought after.
I think. Yeah, definitely. People want to. My father always said, "People make business with people and not with businesses." So, wow, I've put it in a perfect English translation. It was wow. Got to put that into a GIF or something. Anyway, absolutely. I totally agree, and I think you can really unlock very inconvenient territories through working or through creating media that explains things in a new way, and also makes it possible that you can connect with someone, even though it's an asynchronous kind of communication or a kind of a one-dimensional communication, but it feels like there's a person who embodies this knowledge. And I think this is much more powerful than any, and this is probably what makes creative coding so powerful also in the end, because it is a visual representation of code you write. Yeah, absolutely agree. What I also would like to say here, that's something I find important. So one of the reasons from my point of view why graphic design is so conservative, or let's say visual communication, because I don't like the term graphic design that much. I think even though it is globally, globally it's a very good term to use, but I would say visual communication is more precise because it includes much more than just creating graphics. So one of the problems that visual communications have is that they have a tradition in print, in static media. And static media is very easy to work with, right? So I would like to see, and I think they are already existing, like the Klasse for Digitale Grafik in Hamburg, for example, but not taking print media as a foundation from a technological point of view, but taking the web. Or, the web is an amazing platform, and I'm thinking about a web curriculum since quite a while, because it makes it very easy to put some design assets to a page, right? Like images and fonts, and make them interactive, make them style, make them responsive, and then you can use JavaScript to make crazy stuff. I would like to point out my community spotlight with the amazing Yevan Song, who creates websites that are not really websites. They feel like, virtual worlds, just with basic web technologies. And maybe if graphic design institutions and educational institutions for graphic design would embrace the web more, and learning the very fundamental skills of CSS and HTML, which is not too difficult, right? Everybody can make it. Then a new way of thinking would get possible, or would be, would maybe arise.
I think this is an excellent point. But again, I think on the rise of new platforms, new media, they're always.
Oh, that's great. Now
Okay.
we're back. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, you got to repeat your answer. I'm sorry
Yeah,
for that.
sure. It's like whenever a new media arrives, there's always a tendency, proven historically even, to remediate based on the fact that previous media that came before it. How did we use them? Like as television arrived, the very early television broadcasts almost resembled like just like radio shows, just with a visual side, because we knew how to make radio broadcasts. And so we just applied whatever knowledge we had about that to television. So it took a while for television to emerge and arrive in its own form and to define itself and, to mature as a medium. And then you have all these overlapping transitions of media following each other. And we tend to be stuck in, sometimes even in very old preconceptions of how to work with stuff. You can just take a look at the tool palette in Illustrator or Photoshop, whatever. All of these are references to analog tools like a brush tool or a ruler or like physical, tangible stuff. And they build on past references of something that belongs to an analog era. Whereas, with code, we have an ability now to tap into this computational aesthetic, but, it means that we have to leave behind our knowledge of how to work with analog and fully embrace and expose the potential of digital medium. We can do that with code, but we're still, I would argue, at a point in time where this is a new medium to a lot of designers. And of course, we can't help but, looking back into the past and clutching onto the straws that we knew of things that were working fine. That is one thing. So, but, really challenge the new medium, find out how to work with this and make it mature. And that comes over time. So I'm not too worried about that. The other thing is that when we're talking about visual communication, again, we have some very well established norms throughout centuries of how we people communicate visually with each other. And of course, we need to challenge those as well to make sure that we evolve. But if we become too radical or if we challenge them too much, we risk losing the ability to really communicate and to convey our message. And again, perhaps this little, parentheses, I'm talking here from the perspective of a visual communicator, a graphic designer. I'm using code in a way to build tools for clients who need to convey a specific message. And they need to do so while staying on brand and being homogeneous and, all of these things that, comes with doing commercial communication. So, of course, on the other hand, if you're working with code as an artist, you're much freer to, just disregard any norms of communication and just do whatever you feel, because that's your project and you don't need to comply to anything. So that's parentheses end.
Yeah, but I think absolutely that's totally right. And maybe I know this is a very long chapter here, but I want to add something that I just discovered. We in Germany we have a very strong, not just in Germany, and probably in many filter bubbles around the world, we have a very strong affinity to Swiss typography. Swiss typography works very well on posters and on printed media. The complexity of the web has some challenges that Swiss typography often struggles with. So if you have a very complex structure on your website, for example, you need to have a museum and you need to order things in a way that work, you need to embrace some elements and some methodologies, from my point of view, that sometimes are kind of breaking the rules of Swiss typography. And this, again, leads to aesthetics that people often don't resonate with that much, I think. Also that, Swiss typography is all about measuring every millimeter, every point, right? And if you have a website, just look at the website. Yesterday I've made a research I just was looking at some websites of large museums. On my screen, I've got a 16:9 screen here. They look like hell, right? Like crap. It's like super wide thing, and the content is bound to just the middle. But that's the web, right? I think we need to embrace what the web is. So people are trying to build websites that take Swiss typographic principles and put them into a website, but in the end, the website is not really easy to use. Right?
Exactly. It's a new medium. It's new technology. You can try desperately to transfer whatever was working on a different medium to a new platform. But sometimes it's going to work. Other times it's going to fail. Swiss typography has absolutely got something going for it in functional terms. But I think it's so refreshing to have. Just shake it up a bit. That's perhaps due to the success that David Carson got back in the 90s, the knots, with this very distinct David Carson style, with him really trying to flip the bird, so to speak, to every established norm of how you would do visual communication. And he made these really, if people are not aware of the work of David Carson, just look it up. It's got its own very distinct set of aesthetics to it. He was very recognized back in the days for that particular style. And that challenged the established norms and was a breath of fresh air. And proved that you could indeed make design in a different style and to some purposes, yes, it was really good. We probably wouldn't want to make an annual report for a big Fortune 500 company, David Carson style, but
who knows?
Who knows?
Awesome. Okay. Shall we go for one more?
Should we go for one more? Yes, let's do that.
What do you think?
Should I? Well, okay, Tim, this is what we get. This is a work by David Shrigley. And it's, I don't know, perhaps telling or revealing about how it is as a creative person to have, I don't know, struggles coming up with something creative. Yeah. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think this relates a lot to the Nia Machina methodology for me. So if you're talking about ideation here, my personal ideation, well, how I come up with ideas has a specific pattern, I think. So, and this pattern is a little bit weird. And but I think it's definitely worth discussing it. So I am a musician, as you know. So I play music. That's how I just grew up, making electronic music in my bedroom. Since then I'm quite doing music all the time. Sometimes fewer, sometimes more, right? So, and also since 2019, since I studied, I started to be amazed about ancient philosophy from Greece, especially. So about Socrates and also, well, the Roman Stoics and all this stuff. And I really started to try to understand, to get an overview of what happened in that time. And this influenced everything in my daily life from my perspective. I started to collect, because in creative coding, in my teaching, I would say I teach creative coding in the realms of graphic design or in visual communication. I need images I work with. I need accessible images that can be used, that are under a public domain license, or I can even go out and do my own images, but I love to work with cultural artifacts that I find on the internet. So also this work or this thought processes about ancient times led me to deep research in museum archives online. So the Metropolitan Museum of Art, for example, has a gigantic collection of artworks. I started to discover what kind of art did the people do when, in ancient times, back in Greece or Rome, or even in Asia or anywhere else. So that led me to new ideas. This kind of shaped my imagery that I use, right? I really love that. It's a very nice, it's an interesting ping pong game between music, philosophy, creative coding, tinkering around with my Raspberry Pi, for example, what I really like at the moment, working with Linux, and I see that all these things connect with each other as a net. And so the point I want to make here is I see that ideas often come from completely unexpected directions. So, and I think it's very worth trying to mix up things and activities that have nothing to do with each other. Swimming, I do swimming now, for example. So I love swimming. I really, it's something very new for me. But I have very good ideas when I'm in the water. What I also want to say here, I often see my students applying this pattern, but in a sometimes a replicant way. They say, oh, we got to do some creative coding. Let's take some statues of Greek philosophers to create posters. But that's not really the pattern I want to trigger here. That's not the intention I have. I want people to think about themselves, what interests them, and what kind of motives they would use to and what kind of colors and fonts they would use to create a creative framework. I mean, this is a long answer, but I think it's really worth thinking about your tool set, right? The material that you use. And it's something I'm very picky about. I love collecting images. And when I find something, just a little detail in a photography made 1895, I don't know. And I just take a little detail and just put it into my image library, which is a folder with about 30 images that I use very often. Then it's like a finding. It's a moment of joy for me, like, whoa, I found a new image. And then I'm going back to reading, and oh, this is a philosopher. Oh, this is Simone Weil. Who is Simone Weil? Oh, she's a French philosopher. Then I start reading a book that tells me a bit about her life. So it's just like playing ping pong all the time with all these different directions.
Yeah, great answer.
The longest answer I could do, but okay.
Well, you and I tend to share that ability. Or I mean that's a great answer, and I really as you were talking, I thought making connections back to what we've been discussing, this prompt card saying make it your own. That's, I think, really as you said, you're taking Greek philosophers and using them in your poster series because you had an interest in Greek philosophy and you were looking into Greek philosophy and you read some of their writings and of course you found some, I don't know, images of Socrates or whatever, put in your image library. And then funny thing is that I see, even my students that again, thank you on their behalf. They're very grateful for all your online content.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But
cool.
They sometimes, in my courses tend to, discover your tutorials. And I have seen my fair share of, say, just the one where you're, taking this kinetic typography.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, as you're mentioning, they don't even bother changing even the letter A or even the font, or sometimes even the image of Socrates. And if they're replacing it with something that is, I don't know, almost similar. Whereas, really spur people on to, take a look at this, look at what I've made, but make it your own.
Make it your own. That's amazing.
Make it your own.
Yeah.
Choose another image.
Now I get it much more. And I think these two answers need to be in one video because that's basically the same, the same topic, right? Yeah, absolutely. So totally. So there's a problem also. Copy pasting. I was thinking a lot about sharing my code on my website. I've been discussing this with some very great community members who are also very skilled programmers. I'm very thankful for having these people in my community. Also engaging with all the others, helping them, solving code questions and solving code problems, which is very nice. And one of them told me that as a software engineer and also as a studied artist, he would propose to create some little bugs into my code that can be copy pasted on my website to make people think about what's wrong there. Well, I'm still not really sure if that makes sense for me, but the problem is, when I post a video tutorial on YouTube, people just copy paste the code, create a visual out of that, post it on Instagram, said, "Hi, I've learned creative coding." And it's like, so I would encourage, and to be honest, I never or mostly didn't watch any tutorial videos while learning to code, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I was getting back to Daniel Schiffman, The Nature of Code. Some of these books really helped me. But I'm not I would say, being lost in a rabbit hole of tutorial in this kind of binge watching sessions where you just watch, where you're just there to get entertained and just take the code as a trophy that you watch the tutorials. This is not what it's for. You got to do it yourself, make it your own. That's
you have to be able to watch a tutorial and deduct from it the essence being that it's a principle that's being demonstrated to you, and everything that is to do with colors and fonts and images and such, that's just replaceable assets. I believe another pedagogical strategy or didactical strategy would be to use what I've been looking into recently, these so-called worked examples. I don't know if you're aware of that term. No. Worked examples are kind of like, as the name implies, it's an example that has been made that is actually working. It's a principle for demonstrating how to achieve something, but it's very bare bones and it's very just a scaffold for you to work from. But then sometimes you see teachers and educators taking the idea of a worked example and then just backtracking a bit, replacing actual lines of code with comments saying, at this point in the code, you would draw something. At this point in the code, you would add a double nested for loop. At this point, so you don't spell out the word letter by letter or function by function. You kind of like give them a little bit of a shopping list or like an ordered list of to-dos, but they need to work out for themselves, what order do these things need to go in? Where do I need to put it and such? So
that's a good point.
That perhaps I'm now in my research to, as we were discussing, relationship of Gen Zers to traditional textbooks, try to blend worked examples with video tutorials. Because I think there's something in that combination, video supported work examples.
So my paradigm, how I was thinking about creating my code snippets was, I'd never added any comments because I thought when I avoid comments, people start reading the code, but maybe the opposite is the case. So I wanted them to try to find out what's going on there, but probably that's not the best idea. I mean, I definitely have to re-record my first course, by the way. Maybe that's a good new perspective I can use to do that once. Yeah. That's good. That's a really, really good idea. Yeah, love that. That's cool.
Okay.
Whoa, Stig, we've got 2 hours and 16 minutes of recording. For me, it was a great pleasure to speak to you. As always, I mean, all our conversations are so valuable for me. And I think it's really cool to have, somebody who is in the same sphere and we can swap ideas.
Well, likewise, Tim, I really appreciate being invited by you and having a chance to tell a little bit more about things that might be a little bit more off tangent as compared to some of the previous guests you've had on Community Spotlight. They tend to be really awesome and amazing designers, and they have a lot more like visual stuff to show. I might perhaps not have that huge array of truly original stuff, show. I guess if you were to look into my processing a sketch folder, it would probably reflect this pedagogical strategy that I developed of this deconstruction, reconstruction. So I'm building mainly my knowledge on taking something that has been made before and trying to disassemble that and rebuild that using code. But that's a topic for another day. So hopefully this discussion hasn't been too long-winded or too boring for your audience. Otherwise, I'm just putting my faith totally in your editing skills, and you will make this into something that is a lot more snappy and to the point and enjoyable to watch.
Awesome. I'm super positive that this will be the foundation for some very, very valuable videos. Okay, let's end the stream, but stay in line. I want to just talk to you again after the stream. And I say, everyone, thank you so much for joining. It was great to have you here. And see you next time. Bye-bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to learn more about creative coding, hit the subscribe button. And if you have decided to learn creative coding, you could possibly be interested in my Patreon community. So you get two things. First, you get access to all of my courses that I publish on my website, timrodenbrücker.de, and also to the Discord channel, the Discord server. And there are many people exchanging ideas and questions and answers about creative coding and beyond. So make sure you check that out. You can also join the Discord server without being a patron. Just a few channels will not be visible for you. And I would really love to welcome you in my Patreon community. Thank you so much and have a great day.